Why are asylum denial rates so high? If you've spent even 5 minutes Googling asylum in the United States or talked to pretty much anyone about it, then you know that it's hard to win an asylum case. Approval rates are low, very low. And in this video, I'm gonna tell you why it's so hard to win asylum in the United States. That way, you'll know what you're up against in pursuing asylum. If we're just now meeting, I'm Brian Manning, and I used to be an asylum officer with the government, but now, as an asylum lawyer, I help immigrants all over the country to secure their future in America through asylum. All right, I won't try to sugarcoat it. Chances for winning asylum are not high. For cases with USCIS, which is the agency that handles affirmative asylum cases for people who are not in immigration court proceedings, the approval rate was under 28%, according to the most recent statistics. And in immigration court, only 26% of asylum claims were approved between 2001 and 2021. That means that historically, asylum seekers have had a 1 in 5 chance of winning. It doesn't inspire confidence, does it? But why is this? Why is it so hard to win asylum in America? Well, I think it comes down to two things. One, the structure of the system, and two, the people working in that system. But before I explain that, let me tell you two commonly cited reasons that I do not think are to blame. First, you may hear people say the asylum officers get rewarded for denying cases. That's not true, or at least there's no formal system of rewards and nothing concrete that they get for denying asylum. I'm sure of this. As a former asylum officer, I can tell you that they don't get any kind of bonus pay for denying a claim, and that they don't get higher marks in their job reviews or anything like that. Second, a lot of people think that politics plays a formal role in decisions, when it really does not. It's a myth that the state of US relations with another country affects how asylum seekers from that country are treated. I can understand why someone would think that there's a policy that promotes approving asylum claims of the US government's rivals and denying cases of people from our allies. That seems logical, right? But I promise you, no such policy exists. Never once in my training as an asylum officer or during my time on the job did the state of our country's relations with another nation ever come up as a factor that we should consider in deciding cases. In fact, I would say that most asylum officers don't really know whether the United States has a good relationship with most countries that they're dealing with. It's just not something that most officers are interested in or are trained on, and it's not relevant to the asylum eligibility analysis. Now, there's no denying that a country's reputation, informed by how it's portrayed in the media and popular culture, makes an impact on judges and asylum officers. But I can say with confidence that there's no policy for taking into account US relations with another country, and that there's moreover not even any informal pressure to do so. It's really not an issue. But what about domestic politics? Like, are there policies that lead to more asylum denials under Democratic administrations than Republican administrations, or vice versa? Well, yes, the policies of the party in power do make a difference, but to be honest, both Republicans and Democrats have proved largely unfriendly to asylum seekers. By the way, if you want to maximize your chances for asylum success, then be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification so that you don't miss the insights that I share on this channel. All right, so I said earlier that the structure of the system is one of the things that makes it so hard to get asylum. What do I mean by that? Well, to start with, the laws were never really intended to make getting asylum easy. They set a very high standard for qualifying. You have to meet various requirements to establish your eligibility for asylum, and it's not easy to do this. For example, it's not enough just to convince the decision maker that you're at real risk of being seriously harmed. You also have to convince them that the persecutor's motivation to harm you stems from the fact that you possess one of the 5 protected characteristics under US asylum law. And these 5 protected grounds are race, religion, nationality, political opinion, and something called membership in a particular social group. The problem is that persecutors don't always announce their intentions in selecting their targets. They don't necessarily explain why they want to harm you, like, hey, I want to hurt you because of your political opinion. It's usually not so explicit, so you have to use circumstantial evidence to convince the asylum officer or immigration judge that you're being targeted on account of a protected characteristic. Now, this is just one example. There are other aspects of the way that the asylum law and policies are structured that just make it hard to qualify. It's no help that the asylum framework is outdated. Our rules were established after World War II and were crafted to help refugees of the sort that were persecuted by the Nazis. And while similar persecution still exists, there's also a lot of bad things going on out there of a very different nature. It's not necessarily always a government harming or trying to commit genocide against specific people groups. So for example, in recent times, we've seen lots of people fleeing gang violence. But these victims rarely qualify for asylum because the asylum laws were not written with this kind of persecution in mind. It's simply not the sort of persecution that is covered by the now antiquated asylum laws. Next, the setting in which asylum seekers are asked to explain their case is another factor contributing to low approval rates. In immigration court, a lawyer for the government, whose goal is to deport you, asks you questions in a hostile way and is trying to demonstrate to the judge that you should not get asylum. Now, interviews at the asylum office are supposed to be non-adversarial, meaning the asylum officer is supposed to be an objective arbiter, neutral. But very often, they end up being hostile. And in any event, it can be really hard for an asylum seeker to explain their case in a 2-hour interview or court hearing, especially when the judge or officer just asks question after question and rarely lets them just explain their situation. To be sure, the officer in an asylum interview and the judge in immigration court won't just let you tell your story and express yourself freely. Rather, they'll dictate how things go, making it hard for you to state your case. Note that the government does not provide you a lawyer for your asylum case. You're allowed to have one at the asylum office and in court, but you've got to pay for it yourself or find a free lawyer. This is not like criminal cases where the government will give you a lawyer if you can't afford one. So this is another feature of the system that makes it hard to win, because you're much more likely to win if you do in fact have a lawyer. Okay, last thing on the system and how it's structured leads to high denial rates. Both judges and asylum officers are overworked. There's intense pressure on them to get through as many cases as possible, and they just get overwhelmed. The workload means that they don't give cases the full attention that they deserve. And because of this, the decision maker is less likely to understand meritorious cases in a way that will make clear that they should be approved. Also, a stressed, overwhelmed mind just tends to say no. In close cases where a decision maker is stressed, they're more likely to render a negative decision. Related, judges and asylum officers can suffer from emotional fatigue, which can cause them to distance themselves from a case, which may make them miss important things and not consider the case adequately. They're hearing sad stories every day about terrible things that have happened to people, and this can lead to secondary post-traumatic stress disorder and cause them to kind of put up a wall or not engage with the case as fully as they should. I can tell you from experience, deciding asylum cases is hard. All right, so that covers the structural issues contributing to high asylum refusal rates. So what about the human aspect? Are these asylum officers and judges anti-immigrant and even racist, as some people accuse them of being? Well, some of them, in my opinion, yes, they are. I was really surprised by this when I became an asylum officer with USCIS. I expected, somewhat naively in retrospect, that most people there would be at least kind of pro-immigrant. It just seemed natural that such people would find working for a government immigration agency to be attractive. Sadly, what I found instead were way too many people who seemed to be actively looking for ways to deny benefits to immigrants. It turns out that the prospect of exercising power over such consequential decisions as who gets to stay here with asylum is something that attracts a lot of people who would prefer not to have so many immigrants in the country. So yeah, there are a bunch of people, unfortunately, at USCIS who go out of their way to find excuses to deny asylum seekers. The immigration courts are probably even worse in terms of decision makers who bring with them a worldview that militates toward rejections rather than approvals. You see, a lot of immigration judges are former prosecutors with ICE, which is the agency that handles deportations. This means that these judges spent years as the lawyer arguing that someone should be deported. And this involves a law enforcement mindset. It's the job of an ICE attorney to come up with convincing arguments as to why someone should not get asylum and should instead be deported. And it's hard to shake this mentality and all of a sudden become a wholly objective, neutral arbiter just because you're now in a different role. So it's no wonder that asylum denial rates are so high in immigration court, given that many judges are coming from a background where they've been trying every day to disprove asylum cases and trying to get asylum seekers deported. Another problem contributing to high denial rates at both USCIS and the immigration courts is a lack of knowledge. While most immigration judges know the basics of immigration law, they're not always up to speed on the specifics of asylum, which is one of the most complicated areas within immigration law. And as for asylum officers, well, I can say from experience that the agency's training on asylum is actually really good. Training is one of the things that USCIS does well. But unfortunately, some of the people hired into this position just aren't equipped to apply the asylum laws and policy. Most asylum officers are not lawyers, and most of them don't have experience interpreting and applying complex laws. Also, many asylum officers didn't come into the job equipped with the kind of analytical tools needed to do the job well. Now, we've covered some of the reasons that it's so hard to win asylum, why the judges and asylum officers deny so many people. But what does all this mean for you as an asylum seeker? Well, it means that you've got to present an excellent case. It means that to have a real shot at success, you've got to structure and explain your case in a way that shows that you're eligible for asylum, in a way that makes it all but impossible to deny you. We help people do exactly that every day. So if you're ready to take the next step and get individualized help with your asylum case, then call my office today. The number's 713-909-0401. And we help people all over the country, so it doesn't matter where you are. Call us now to schedule an asylum strategy session so we can help you secure your future in America through asylum. Again, I'm Brian Manning, and it's an honor to serve you in your asylum journey.